Hey everybody, welcome to another brand new episode of CPOV Autographs. I, of course, am still your host, Matt, aka Stormageddon. Wait, am I? Now is not the time for an existential crisis. As far as I know, I am still Matt, aka Stormageddon. And before we get into this week's episode, I do want to shout out my video game podcast, because I haven't in a while, Fun and Games podcast, because today's episode is somewhat related, actually quite related. Fun and Games, if y'all aren't familiar, is a video game related podcast that I host with the incredible Jeff Moonen. We talk to folks within the games industry, both about the games they love or the games they're working on. We've had some incredible guests like Yuri Lowenthal, who is most famously recently known as the voice of Spider-Man, as well as a million other amazing voices. We've had nerdcore rapper Beefy. We've had folks who work within the games space talking about the games that they've worked on. We have some more episodes in the pipeline as of when I'm recording this with more stuff like that. We also talk about genres of games. We talk about styles of games, trends in the games industry. It's kind of just a fun conversational space to explore video games as we love them, as the art form that they continue to grow to become more ubiquitous as. It's a really fun show. I really love doing it, and I would love for y'all to check it out. You can find it at certainpov.com, where you already find this podcast. You can also, of course, go to Fun and Games Pod at Twitter or at Facebook or at Instagram. All the info there for the pod as well. But enough about my other projects. Let's talk about this episode. This episode is with the incredible Mike Arkin, who works for Big Boat Interactive, and the incredible Sam Haft, who is part of the incredible group, the Living Tombstone. Together, along with a bunch of other folks, they are working on a brand new video game coming soon called AudioClash, The Battle of the Bands. It is a rhythm strategy game using unique original music to do a card-based strategy game. It's very interesting, really cool, and I got a preview of that game as well as getting to chat with these lovely folks. We talk about the game, their influences, how this differs for writing music for other projects, and all of their influences when it comes to games. It was a lovely chat. I had a blast talking to them, and I hope you'll enjoy it too. Here's my incredible interview with Mike Arkin and Sam Haft. But yeah, no, I'm really excited to have you both here. I'm very excited about AudioClash. I'm a longtime fan of the Living Tombstone. I'm a longtime fan of you, Sam, in particular as well. I've been following your work since the Sam and Bill days. And,
Shucks.
I know about The Creek in the Cave, co-host
we go way back. Yeah.
We go way back. So my good friend Rachel Quirky Shank is a co-host on my podcast, Screen Snark.
Of course.
And so I discovered you and Bill through her. And it's funny too, because when Josh mentioned that I was going to chat with both of you, I was like, Sam Haft, why do I know that name? Yeah. Where is that from? And so,
as I have recently discovered, there are a handful of Sam Hafts strewn across this country. I could have been a different one. Yes, there's one in Boston. And there's one in LA, another one in LA. So I guess we have to fight.
We got to fight.
Yes, we do have to fight. There's one in Australia, and he and I have actually connected personally. And he, because of the time difference, he will sometimes call me when he has had a few drinks and it is in the middle of my afternoon. And he'll be like, "Oh, Sam, we're the same. You should come into my house. We should switch lives." And it's
I love that.
Very fascinating that I feel like we were both born in March. Our IMDb profiles constantly merged with each other because he is also a performer.
Amazing.
He was in the Peter Rabbit movies.
Wow.
Yeah, he's in the James Corden franchise, and so I sometimes hear from him. Sometimes it'll be like, "Oh, IMDb, they did it again," but sometimes it's just, "Come live in my house." Once he conference called me with a friend of his who did not know he was getting a conference call. It was like, "Listen, there's another me, and the other guy's like, "Sam, it's bloody 3 a.m. What are you doing calling me?" It was. I feel like I've been involved in the fringes of his drunken late night drama.
Amazing.
Hey, Sam.
Yes.
Can I give you a little fatherly advice?
Yes.
Don't go to Australia ever.
I am terrified of Australia. It has all of the things that I don't want to interface with in my regular life.
I just mean I don't think you should go anywhere near this guy because he's just waiting to eat you or something.
Consume your power and become one.
Yeah, no, I feel like he's like the negative version of me, where I'm gonna show up and he's gonna look exactly like me, but like completely dark gray with glowing red eyes. Like he's just gonna
like
be
Nega
like
Scott from
exactly.
Scott Pilgrim. Exactly.
Yeah, he's gonna be like the shadow mini boss version of myself.
Before we get too far off
my house now. Okay.
Before we get too far off the rails, too late. I would love for you both to introduce yourselves, just so folks know each person's voice, and just tell the folks a little bit about yourself, what you do, how you're involved with AudioClash, that kind of thing.
Mike, why don't you kick us off?
Oh, all right. Hey, I'm Mike Arkin. I'm a 35-year veteran game producer. I started at Acclaim in 1987. I was 18 years old. I literally wandered in off the street and asked them to hire me, and they did, which is really strange. I've worked on 200 games over the years, everything from The Simpsons to Terminator 2, WWF Wrestling, Die Hard trilogy at Fox, Alien versus Predator, the original Alien versus Predator game. 5 years later, another Alien versus Predator game, a bunch of casual games, some mobile games, Battlezone at Activision. And for the last 10 years, I've run my own virtual studio. And, about 2 years ago, we started working on AudioClash with Sam and Yoav, which has been the greatest experience of my life.
I pay him to say that. I am Sam Haft. I am one half of the Living Tombstone. One half of the Living Tombstone. I joined the band about 4 or 5 years ago. At the beginning of our long national nightmare that we still live in. And now I am part of the process. It's been, first of all, just like really cool for me, jumping in about, halfway through the lifespan of the Living Tombstone, because there were a good 5-ish years before me, and getting to know Yoav first as a friend and then as a coworker, and that's been kind of amazing. My roots initially, as Matt knows, are in the New York kind of cabaret scene, where I used to, write and perform comedy. Now I am no longer in New York, but I'd like to think I'm still occasionally entertaining. So Matt and I actually have a ton of friends in common, which I realized the moment we crossed paths on social media earlier today. I was like, hold on a second, why do you know everybody I know?
Yeah. Anyone who knows really Abe Goldfarb, as far as I'm concerned, is a good person. Like
in the Abe Goldfarb extended universe, in which we are both fringe members.
We are both fringe members. Happy to be.
Yes. I thrilled to do this show. Thrilled to connect with you, Matt, given our intersection of worlds. I met Mike, as Mike said, about 2 years ago. We had just, we had been approached, the Living Tombstone had been approached to, hey, what's your idea for doing a game? And we thought, okay, yeah, like how are we going to do a game? How are we going to pull this off? We've made so much content that's about games. So why don't we put together, a project of our own in that space? And we knew it had to be musical. But the one thing we wanted to avoid was a rhythm game, because it seemed like the most obvious choice of, if you're going to do something related in music, it'll just be some form of DDR or Guitar Hero, and that'll be that. So our goal was to really try to do something a little out of the box. And so we came up with this idea for this Battle of the Bands game that I like to describe as an intersection of Scott Pilgrim and Pokemon. And we went from there. We sat down, we got introduced to Mike, who was friends with a neighbor of Yoav's dad. Like, it was just this weird tangential meeting. And I sit down with Mike and one of his game production partners, Gary, at a coffee shop with Yoav, and like 3.5 hours had passed, and we were just kind of connecting and telling each other stories about being in the music side of the world and the game business side of the world and so on. And it was, we just really got along. And after that, we called our financial partner in the game, and we were like, we got to do the game with this team. They're, most importantly, we like to work with them.
Amazing. I love that. It's always interesting for me when musicians get involved with games, right? It's happened for years. Like, I mean, even in the arcades, like back in the day, Revolution X with Aerosmith.
God, I love Revolution X. That is, I will make a beeline for that cabinet whenever I see it in an arcade.
Like, and so music's always been involved. Rock music and music of every kind has always been involved with music. I mean, I grew up playing old school rhythm stuff to, of course, the modern rhythm games. I love Fuser. I'm a featured Fuser streamer. And so like, I'm deep into how music integrates with games. And of course, all great games have had great soundtracks, right? Like the best games of all time always have killer soundtracks as well.
Absolutely.
Kind of like hand in hand. And so what I'm curious about when making a game like this, and both Mike, you and Sam can answer however you want to handle it. When making a game like this, obviously the music's important, right? Living Tombstone is going to make a ton of original stuff for this, maybe throw in some stuff that already exists as bonuses. But how do you construct music around a game like this versus when you typically would, right? Because I have to imagine when composing for a regular, whatever you would consider a regular game, it's got to be a little different for this, right? Because there's expectations as a band, and there's expectations when you're not trying to be a rhythm game, but still be involved.
I mean, this completely deconstructed what our normal songwriting process is, because, like we've also made music for games, right. for indie games, for I would call it an indie plus game that is coming out in September called In Sound Mine, a horror game that we worked on. And so like we have worked on the music side for games, and that is very different. That is much more like, I would say like 50% film scoring, 50% songwriting, whereas this is completely deconstructed. It's like when you're, if it's like going to like a molecular gastronomy restaurant and they're like, this is our deconstructed PB&J, and it's like a foam and like a crumbled cracker. And we had to take the foam and crumbled cracker approach where, every piece of sound that is coming out of the game is something that is coming from a band member that is on your team. And so, and that sound also needs to correspond with the move that you have picked for them to do. So the way that we've done this is by kind of a card system, because I'm a huge nerd and I love, Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh!
Oh, yeah.
I play a lot of card games. The way that it works from a technological standpoint, which at the time that we pitched this to Mike and team, we had no idea if it would work, but it has, and good, because otherwise there would be no game. So the way that it works is that every song is essentially a deck, and that is a deck of moves, but those moves are also instrumental stems, and every single move is kind of a loop that can layer over any other loop, that together you are arranging from this song, which is itself the song is almost like a suite of music that goes together. It's not, it is not just a song because it is not linear. It is completely non-linear, that you can kind of Lego in any fashion, in any order. So each deck that you play, which is like playing, a constructed deck in a card video game almost, like you're not assembling your own deck from constituent cards. You're picking like constructed draft decks. And because otherwise it would be absolute audio anarchy, and our brains would melt out of our ears. But you pick these moves round by round, and each move is associated with a guitar line in that song, a bass line in that song, a drum pattern or a drum fill in that song, a vocal pattern in that song. And so there are, like 10, 12 of each of those things, so that the combinations that you can put forth round to round are always going to sound different. And in that way, you know, one of the things that was important was kind of simulating the experience of having the rock band and running the rock band and being able to assemble the band members that you want in your rock band, and then being able to make your band sound like your band and not like
Right.
everybody else's band. And so that kind of variety where the moves and the audio are working in concert was kind of the plan from the beginning. And so it really works out, so that, you know, from the audio creation side, what we had to do was we had to say, okay, well, this song, this is the chord vamp, and this is the key it's in and the tempo it's in and the general kind of rhythmic structure of it, and then just create all over those same rules, so that any of those layers would sound good together. And then that collectively, when you stick, you know, like 40 of those together, that's a song. And so, you know, round to round, you are getting a random draw of moves from that song, which means of the ones that you pick, you're always going to sound pretty much a little different every time you do it.
That's awesome. And like Mike, mechanically, from like the tech side, I have to imagine this is a challenge to create, right? But it sounds like you've been working in games a long time, so this doesn't sound too far afield from the kinds of things you might have worked on mechanically, right?
I mean, yeah, and no. I mean, you know, we talked a little bit about how, you know, music in games and how this is a little bit different. And it's true, like, you know, if you go back in time, like PlayStation 1, which was when we started doing like real high fidelity music in games, there was just CD tracks, right? So a musician would just lay down 3 minutes of music and you would just play it. So like there was no music guy on the team even, right?
Right.
You would just be like, one command starts the CD player playing and that's it. That's our music. We're done. Okay, what's next? And, you know, even like moving forward in time, I mean, most of the games I've worked on, that's been the paradigm. It's just you play the music and you move on. Now, a lot of better games use dynamic music, right? Where you might have multiple tracks that you're kind of switching. Oh, it's getting to be more actiony, and the music kind of ramps up
Right.
and gets more actiony. And so that was always something that I was exposed to. And like certainly you would just hire a musician that knew how to do that. And a lot of the tools like, you know, Wise or Fmod, like you can just hand the musician those tools and they can just construct the music to fit into that system, and no problem, pretty easy. But this was like a whole different thing. And so, you know, in a lot of ways, like Sam said, we weren't really sure if it was going to work. And, you know, when we first got the game running, we were, I think, pretty, you know, pleasantly surprised, right? Like, oh, wow, it actually works and the music all works together. And, you know, thanks to Sam and Yoav and putting that music together in a way into a system, which in many ways they designed. You know, the Sam and Yoav designed the system for how the music all fits together. And like when they give us a song, it's, and Sam may know this better than I do, actually, it's like hundreds of stems that all fit together. And you know, depending on which musicians you have on your team, it's going to sound different. And, you know, we've talked a lot about the fact that like when you play a round of AudioClash, you're making a piece of music. It's not quite like GarageBand. Sometimes we talk about like, you know, it's like GarageBand, but because you're not making the music, but you're rearranging it.
Yeah.
And
you are a music arranger.
yeah. And so we're kind of like thinking a little bit. And, you know, the thing about a small game, like an indie game, is that you don't always have time to do everything you want to do. But like down the line, we definitely want to add some way that you can like save your music and make a music video or something like that. You know, you get to the end of a round and you're like, oh, that sounded pretty cool. You know, let me save that and then like, you know, play around with it afterwards. So it's kind of cool. I mean, I've spent a career making games with music, and I feel like this is the first time I've made a you know, game that is music. And I like that. You know, people like music.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I think that in the indie game space, especially, I think there's this pressure to be a little different, right? Like and even that isn't as true as it used to be. There are indie games that look graphically similar to AAA games, like A Plague's Tale and a few other games. And so, but I think what makes an indie game feel indie is this idea that seems to deviate from what's quote unquote the norm, whatever the hell that means in the games industry. And AudioClash has that, I think, in look, in sound. Like, I've been lucky to get a little bit hands-on with it. And well, I of course won't go into too much detail. Like, it's been cool to see. Like, I look at this game and go, this is something I've never seen before. This is something I've never heard before. And I'm instantly intrigued. I'm interested in how to utilize. And as a music nerd and a DJ, like, my brain immediately went when I played around, like, oh, okay, I see what this is doing. But what if I did this? What if you could do that? And like, I think that's where the draw is really going to be for this. Before we get too far into the interview, I do have to shout out Yoav. I have to shout out the Living Tombstone, which I said earlier, I've been a fan of for a long time. I've been listening since the first Five Nights at Freddy's song that Yoav did.
Wow, yeah.
Like, I've been following the channel on YouTube and the music since then. And I've just been, what I love about Yoav's take and both of your take, of course, now, is that none of these songs, I don't think I could hear anywhere else. They feel, every song I hear by the Living Tombstone feels like the Living Tombstone. Most recently, I just listened to your Among Us track, which is great. And not only does that remind me of the Living Tombstone, because I hear certain synth sounds and stuff, and I'm like, this is a Living Tombstone song. But I've also heard several other Among Us songs, and it sounds nothing like it. It's its own thing. I'm curious, when you guys are writing, not just for the game, but in general, is that an active decision? Like, we have to stick to this theme to be us, or does it just kind of, is it a pleasantly, like, it just works out that way?
I love being asked this stuff. It is a bit of both. It was a passive thing and has gradually become an active thing as enough time has passed that we've been able to really calcify what makes a Living Tombstone song a Living Tombstone song. And the way that I would define it, because this was one of our kind of early things going on when I was, newly a creative partner in the band, part of it was on my side as a songwriter who has worked as a songwriter I've written music for other artists. And in order to do that, I have had to, and even writing comedy music with Sam and Bill, I have had to say, oh, this is like a Sting and the Police song. What makes a Sting and the Police song?
Right.
So to that angle, and to take that angle for TLT, the way that I like to describe it is as electronic rock, where rhythmically it's influenced by ska and melodically it's influenced by Middle Eastern music. And that is the special sauce that Yoav brings to the table, because his influences are so eclectic, because he did not grow up listening to the same stuff on the radio that we all did.
Sure.
And that is a very big part of the magic, in my opinion, is, first of all, not a lot of people make electronic rock with the ska chords on the 2s and 4s. No one, that's a big part of the TLT, is the da 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 on the offbeats. It's, it is a very different approach. And especially for an act that is not like a rock band with brass, that's the kind of band that you would expect to find that stuff in. But what Yoav does is tends to use kind of sharper synths or guitars, now that we're playing a little more with the kind of rock and roll toolkit lately. And so we use the guitar really almost exclusively as a rhythm instrument, and the bass is where the melody comes in. And that's a little more of an EDM influence there. And so, there are a lot of different pieces that come from a lot of different places influence-wise, and also Yoav loves, it's not, I would call it prog adjacent rock music, stuff like System of a Down.
Sure.
That is, it is eclectic rock. That is sometimes a little bit more formless and a little bit less rigidly A, B, C, B structured song-wise, of like, you got to have the verse and then your pre-chorus and then your chorus and then, that kind of thing. Right. And I think I think a lot of the kind of TLT magic is that kind of stew of influences that Yoav has. And, a big part of me becoming a part of the act as well was not just learning how to write for that, but was also, learning where you can play with that stuff and where you can't. There are places that you can deviate from that will make a really interesting Living Tombstone song. There are also places you can deviate from that will make a really interesting song that doesn't sound like the Living Tombstone. So
Sure.
it's about being able to kind of take the box that Yoav has created and see where we can poke out of the sides here and there. And that's been really exciting too.
I mean, it's very obvious just by looking at the YouTube channel that y'all are nerds, big time nerds. And
oh
I mean,
my God. Yeah.
No secret, right? Like I said, I think most people probably first heard of Yoav from the Five Nights at Freddy's stuff. That stuff got a lot of play, got a lot of circulation.
Totally. Or earlier from My Little Pony stuff.
Yes.
The fandom world is the world that TLT originates in.
And what I love about it is you don't seem to limit yourself. Like one of my favorite remixes that y'all have done, just because it hits me in the right place, is the We Are Our Number One remix. Because
totally.
It's just I unironically love Lazy Town. I think it's just such a delightfully cute kid show. Totally. And rest in peace that actor who made this character so iconic. And then this, the song took off on its own shortly around, I think right before he passed. But then the remixes that have come out since, and of course the one that you guys do is going to be so bonkers and off the wall and out of order and arranged in a way that just makes it funkier and that's all, I think, just how y'all perceive pop culture. And I think that's key to at least from my perspective, the music that you're making, that it's not just the kind of music, but it's the kind of pop culture you're pulling from.
Totally. And it's, we make music not as outsiders, but as insiders to niche stuff. So, right. There are a lot of tracks that we have that are from things that are just kind of memes that we were collectively appreciating as a consumer of memes and not as a corporate, the kids enjoy this meme, I must put LOL face on everything, where it's part of that wave of no, we're on the internet too appreciating this. There was the Dog of Wisdom remix, which is one of my favorite remixes of Yoav's. There was the remix of that weird Bible cartoon that got memed called the Glob Go Gab Galob. There were all kinds of stuff. It's not just the gamer stuff. It is games. It is memes. It is we are online citizens as terminally online as the rest of everybody. And so it really comes from a place of we're seeing it and appreciating it too. And this is the kind of thing that we know how to make about it.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. To shift the conversation a little bit back to video game making and video game influence. Now, sorry, Mike. I know you were kind of chilling, relaxing,
nodding off.
I was actually sleeping.
So let's talk about Big Boat Interactive a little bit. And this game, not only just this game, but the kinds of games that influence the direction of AudioClash. I mean, just with the brief time I spent with AudioClash, I see influences to arcade games I grew up with. I see influences to old school AAA titles. What would you say is some of the biggest things that helped you create the vision for AudioClash, especially aesthetically, the look, the controls, that kind of thing?
I think that ultimately when we started, we really wanted to find a way to combine Doom with World of Warcraft. And I don't think we hit that mark at all. So we're kind of sad about that. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, when this project was first not even pitched us, when it was just suggested, hey, can you go meet these guys? Right. The message I got was, these guys want to make a auto chess game? Can you make an auto chess game? And so I didn't know what auto chess was. Uh-huh. But the funny thing is there's a 50-page thread on a game dev forum that I'm on, and it was all about auto chess. And I had read it, but what when you're watching a movie but you're not paying attention, right? So I'd read this thread, and at the end of the thread I still didn't know what auto chess was, but I knew that there was this phenomena that had come from China or something, and I thought it was chess. Honestly, I was just thinking oh man, we have to make a chess game. So I was so confused. And so I immediately went and downloaded Auto Chess and I played it, and I'm oh, this is, nothing what I thought it was. But what auto chess really is like an RTS.
Yeah.
And I had made like 7 RTSs. So, suddenly I was like, okay, I actually understand a bunch of this, like at its deep fundamental level. And there's a designer that I've worked with for about 15 years, a guy named Rich, who's just a really smart guy. And I called Rich and I said, do you know anything about this auto chess thing? And Rich, he pisses me off so much. Rich is like, he's so good at games. When Rich worked with me at Crave, we worked on Tony Hawk, and Rich was this guy that could like with one hand could like do like a 1,000,000-point trick in Tony Hawk, right? And I mean, it was insane. He was so good. And Rich, when we worked together at Mumbo Jumbo, we worked on this game called Luxor, and Rich would at night go online and play for money, and just would just make $100 a night. And so Rich was like, oh, actually I play Dota Underlords, and I'm like ranked 17th in the world or something, like it's like he's like a competitive online player. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, let's talk about there's this concept from these guys and this music, and we sat and we talked about it. And I think I didn't answer your question, and I'm not sure if I'm going to, but
okay, stories are good.
But I think that the what we were influenced by a lot was Hearthstone.
Sure,
and
I can see that.
I had played Hearthstone Battlegrounds, and because I don't have enough time to like collect the right cards or put the right decks together, I love the idea of Hearthstone, but I could never get good at it because I could never, like some people intrinsically understand like which cards are good with which cards.
Yeah.
Rich. So of course he's like, awesome at all those kinds of games because he knows which cards go with which cards and stuff. But Battlegrounds is like a different thing where you don't have to put the deck together. So I that's something I had played. And in AudioClash, fundamentally, like at the bottom underneath everything else, there is this almost like a card game kind of a system there, right? Where the different moves that each you put these moves on each of your band members, and they do have that similar structure where certain moves are meant to kind of combine with other moves to make combos and things like that. And then there's certain decks. When you pick a song is a deck, I should say songs. There's certain songs that you would play, and each song is designed around like an idea of a strategy, right? Like you can use this song to build up your combo faster. This song is more defensive. And so even though it's not a card game and you have these cool characters playing music, I think Hearthstone was really like a big influence for us. And then I think that I've got the brain of like someone who wants to collect things. And I have like maybe only one of those little Funko things because I have to be really careful. If I buy like more than 3, then the OCD will kick in and I'll have to have every single one of them. And so the idea of having all these different band members, which are like these cool collectible characters, is something that I've really liked, and something that I've really pushed the team, right? Like, how can we have more characters? How can we build some like cool exclusivity? What about like, can we do things that are fun? But we're also trying to constantly balance, like, I want the musicians all to be real musicians. I want people to say, like, that one's me.
Yeah.
Or I really love, The Cure, so I want a character that looks like the guy from The Cure on my team. But on the other hand, we want to have fun sometimes. And so, there is a skeleton. There is Fern. Maybe Sam can explain Fern to us later.
Fern basically has the head of a house plant.
Nice.
Like, is it just Love like it. a plant person?
Amazing.
But Sam, can you explain why?
Oh yeah, because the dev team the modeling side of the team was playing around with the idea of doing headgear, and they were like, hey, look, we replace this character's head with a plant. Wouldn't that be fun? And I said, that's a brand new character. Just make a character that's that.
That's funny.
Love that.
That's funny. I must have missed that conversation.
Yeah.
And then I'm running around saying I want all the characters to be like normal humans. And then like a month ago, I was like, wait, we don't have a zombie? Like, that's a normal human. So now there's a zombie. Like,
yes.
you got to have a zombie. So I'm like super excited for sorry, and your question was about influence. So I think, and I don't want to set Sam off because he'll talk for an hour about Pokemon, but I do think, we were thinking a lot about RPGs where you have all these characters to choose from.
Yeah.
And or like in World of Warcraft, you have all the different mounts, or in Pokemon, everybody has their favorite Pokemon. And so, that I think really influenced us to say, like, originally we were talking about, like auto chess, you just have these simple characters, right? It's like the fighter, the mage. And I just, I was like, no, forget that. We need to have hundreds of characters. Like, eventually maybe you can make your own character, right? So you can make it you.
Right.
But in the short term, the idea is just to be able to make your band super unique, and it's your band.
I mean, I love that. I think what I loved about Rock Band versus Guitar Hero is, like, Guitar Hero, you were choosing created characters who were each unique characters that they created, whereas Rock Band, you could create your own characters and, like, make them look however you wanted and get creative with the tattoos and the color. Like, I made a band of Batman villains just from
That's
using face
awesome.
makeup and all sorts of stuff. And so, like, I love that kind of idea where it's just like, what can we do that's creative? And, like, my experience, like I said, the limited time I had with it, like, everybody was different. Like, there were a lot of different things. There was not, like, let's be real, a lot of games could just have a bunch of white guys and call it a day. And this doesn't.
Oh, yeah.
From
Totally.
out the gate, there's diversity in gender, in nationality, in species, because you have, like, creatures and skeletons and stuff. And so I love that. I love that it's that unique. I think that's what will give a game like this legs, because people can kind of have fun and play with it. I'm curious, considering that obviously we're talking about a video game, and that obviously I do know that both of you play some semblance of video games. I'm taking a guess here. I'm curious if there are games right now that you're really interested in that maybe aren't affecting AudioClash per se, but just games that you really enjoy that are doing something different or challenging you, or that you find comforting, especially as we are hopefully on the tail end of a pandemic, but it's hard to say every day.
Yes.
So are there games that are really standing out to you these days that you, like, really love?
Well, a game that I very much does influence the way that I want people to care about the characters in AudioClash that I'm playing right now is Genshin Impact. I'm playing the shit out of Genshin Impact. I was introduced to it by my 13-year-old stepkid who plays with all their friends, and so now I'm playing Genshin. I'm probably going to play it on stream on the Living Tombstone's Twitch channel this coming Wednesday.
Amazing.
Who knows when this episode comes out? Wednesday, the week from August 4th, Wednesday the 11th. So I'm probably going to play some Genshin Impact on stream. Like, I'm very much enjoying that. I love the variety of characters. I love, the fact that it has that Pokemon element that I want for AudioClash, which is, all these characters are so different, but they have so much character that it's so easy to say, oh man, you know what? I love Bennett. That character, like, really speaks to me, and you get to when there's enough variety, you will encounter at least a couple characters that you're like, man, I really dig their vibe. I really want them on my team. And that's what I want for us very much. Other than that, I'm playing some of the new MOBA that Pokemon released, Pokemon Unite.
I am too.
A lot of the player base of that seems to be very young, so I'm kicking everyone's ass. I am just unfairly wiping the floor with people, except Snorlax mains. Fuck those people. They're just really getting in the way. And what else? I was playing some of the new Ratchet and Clank game, and I think it's great. It just, it feels like the kind of game that people don't make anymore.
Right.
It reminds me of, like, the older Ratchet and Clanks and, like, Jack and Daxter and the kind of adventure action platformers like that were really fun. And I guess and Monster Hunter Rise. Those have been the games that I've been playing a lot recently.
What about you, Mike?
Do you have an hour?
I mean, we don't. Clearly, we don't.
No, we don't. I mean, it's tough for me because I'm in the business, right? People always go, "What's your favorite game?" And I'm like,
"What is your
fuck?
favorite game? Give me a favorite, Mike."
I don't. It's impossible. You can't have I
have a favorite game.
I got to play a different game every day, right? Because there's just so many I mean, I mean, part of it is just having enough money to buy games, right? Versus being young and poor and you can only buy one game a month or whatever. So I've got, 12 games a month in my, Steam library that are unplayed. However, that said, I just finished Wasteland 3.
Cool.
I was a huge fan of the original Wasteland, and I know a lot of people in Exile, and when I lived in LA, I did some work with them here and there, and so I'm just a huge In Exile fan, and I just love the humor and the game design. It's a great game. So actually I there's an expansion. I started it, and I actually need to kind of keep playing it, because the other problem is I used to pick one game and I'd play it until it was finished.
Right.
I would always finish games, and now I've got so many unfinished games. I think I'm going to actually have to retire just so I can go through and finish all the games I'm playing. So I'll just speed round. I played Full Spectrum Warrior. That was like on my to-do list for like 15 years, and I finally
that's a really old game. Yeah,
it's a really old game, but my friend Laralyn was the creative director, and every time I see her, I say, "Oh, I promise I'm going to play Full Spectrum Warrior one day." And we're all getting older, so like time's running out. So I finally played it, and it's just such a fantastic game. All these years later, all the dialogue, there's like all this dynamic dialogue and stuff, and it's great. So I finally got around to playing that. Doom, not Eternal, but like the one
2016.
Doom,
the 2016
one,
one?
the reboot.
Yeah.
I've been playing the hell out of that, because I love
game.
Excellent
I
game.
love first-person shooters, and Doom, like I play a lot of Call of Duty. I like more simmy games, but there's just, I remember playing the original Doom, and when I got fired from Acclaim when I was 20 or something, and I went home and played Doom for a week, right? And I always say, like, Doom is what got me through the trauma of getting fired from my first job, and so there's always like a special place in my heart for Doom. And I had dinner with John Romero and his wife once, and I must have spent a half an hour telling them this story about why I got fired and what a horrible person I was, and how at the bottom, the rock bottom, I played Doom at home alone in the dark and couldn't sleep, but it helped me.
I mean, I feel like that's a thing that we all do, right? Like, we dive into things that bring us comfort. I mean, I remember the first big job I ever got fired from, like, it was an office job. I had a Wii at the time, and I had just downloaded, I just bought Super Mario RPG on the Virtual Console. And so I just went home, and for like a week, I played that game straight through and just beat the hell out of it. And and it's to this day one of my favorite RPGs of all time. I think we bond hard to these experiences because they mean something to us. They're not just toys. They absolutely can just be toys, but they're not always. Sometimes they are lived in deep experiences. And like, you can have that experience from Tetris to Mass Effect to Chrono Trigger. It doesn't matter the kind of game. I think it's what we bond to it based on experience.
Totally. I was actually having a conversation with a friend on Twitter recently about how it was about that thread that people were posting in, like, your favorite game when you were 13. And people were talking about, I played this 6 times, that kind of thing. And I realized how little we replay games now. And I think a big part of that is now all the stores are online. If you want a new game, you can get it immediately. But you're a kid, you don't necessarily have access to money so you can get a game. Like, you get a game now and again, and you can just play the shit out of that game. And so the way in which we play games changes as we get older, and now changes with the convenience of I can just download a game on my phone or whatever. But are there any games that even now, in the technological hellscape we live in, that you still return to and play time and time again?
I'm so glad you asked that. I mean, I used to play Chrono Trigger every year. Chrono Trigger is my favorite game of all time. It's one of the best. I would say it's the best JRPG ever made. I know some folks would find music. I own the Japanese import of the soundtrack. I have a digital download of the soundtrack. Like, beautiful. I'm a giant nerd, and so I've the only copy I have right now is my 3DS version, and I used to play it every year. And then, like Mike was saying earlier, like over the last I think 3 to 4 years, that became less and less as I started a video game podcast, and as I started doing stuff in the games industry and playing more games and trying to complete more stuff for interviews like this. It's like, I've had less time to do that. And so I actually haven't beaten Chrono Trigger in several years. And so I need to go back to it. But that one was like top tier for me. I played every year as often as I could.
Matt, I just want to let you know it's in my queue.
Excellent. Have you never played it?
It's a legend for a reason.
Well, I have a cartridge.
Okay.
And every time I kind of clean up, I see the cartridge. And I actually, I have a SNES. And I think that I played a bit of it, but I never really got into it, nor did I know at the time that it was, when it first came out. I had no idea that it was like a famous game or anything like that, right? It was just, I don't know, it's just some game. Like Square wasn't even famous back then.
Totally.
But I do, every time I look at it, I'm like, I wonder if my save game still works. Like, it's been 30 years. I wonder. But it is no. But in all seriousness, it's in my queue, and I do really mean to play Final Fantasy VII at some point.
It's excellent.
It is so good. And I know you've asked this in the past, Mike, and I would honestly say, listen, the remake does different things with the story, some of them, but you can just play that. Like, you don't have to feel pressure to be like, oh no, I gotta be super hardcore. I gotta play the original version on a PS1 emulator or whatever, or an actual PS1. Like,
there's a PlayStation 1 right there. There's like 4 of them in a box with about 200 games. So I might have to. I don't think I have 7. I think I have like in my box. There's like Parasite Eve that somebody was like, you gotta play this.
Another great game.
Good one.
But I've got to get 7. I think at some point before I die and play it. I think I've got like 3 years left.
I would agree. What about you, Sam? Do you have a game that you always return to?
Ooh, I've got probably like 4, maybe 5. So the number 1 on my list always is Arcanum, which was a Troika game. Troika was a very short-lived game studio. Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky, who created Fallout, it was their studio, and they did Arcanum. They did the first couple Fallout games, and then they did Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Yeah. And that was the collection of games, and then they went out of business for some fucking reason because their games were amazing, but who knows. And they recently teamed up for the first time in like 20 years, and they did that game The Outer Worlds, which was very fun. But I really love their sort of branching nonlinear storytelling, and they were doing it way before fucking Fable took credit. And it was just like it was the first game that I was just stunned by its scale, and it's so replayable that I played it like once a year for 20 years, which is wild. And
I have a copy of that, by the way, somewhere in my house.
It's great, and if you don't, it's $5 from like GOG.com.
And I know Tim, and I'm going to tell him that you said all this because
he is my favorite like narrative writer in the history of the games business. So please tell him I adore him. I for real. Like I would be starstruck if you were like, hey, this is Tim. I'd be like, what the fuck? But I would lose my mind. Other games that I return to, Rogue Squadron 3D. There's no beating a classic. It's just like the best fucking flight battle sim ever. The Tomba games for PlayStation. Yes. I love those games so much.
Great.
These are games that I don't play every year, but maybe every like 3 or 4, I'll be like, remember Tomba? I got to play Tomba. And a game that I'm really meaning to replay that I haven't since it came out was the pair of Golden Sun games. I really want to replay those.
2 of the best RPGs ever made that need a re-release somewhere.
Oh my God. I'm so upset. And part of the reason I've been putting it off, because I've been so positive that Nintendo is going to release a remake for Switch. Yeah. And it just hasn't happened. So I might just have to like get an old Game Boy Advance and get the Golden Sun games. And like, I remember one of my treasured gaming memories was playing through Golden Sun Lost Legacy or whatever the second one was called. And like, probably like 6 hours into the gameplay, you realize, am I playing as the bad guys from the last game? And it was just like blew my fucking mind. And I was like sitting in probably like a school bus or going to summer camp or something. I was like, this is so crazy. Is anyone seeing this? That was a momentous moment in game appreciation for me. So I feel like I got to go back and play those again.
Yeah, it's funny. I wish I had more time. I replayed the Mass Effect trilogy for the Legendary Edition. I have a Mass Effect podcast, and it's one of those franchises that has.
I've actually never played them, and
Sam, you have to play them.
One of my good friends,
Yeah.
Bill, who
It's
you
on
are
my
aware
list.
of, is Mass Effect his favorite game of all time. Like I really got to play the Mass Effect games. They do have that re-released kind of updated version of it. Is that a version that I could jump into as a first one?
Absolutely. It's just the original 3 games of the series remastered for modern consoles, and I highly recommend it. Some of the stuff is dated, but I'd say most of it is still great, and the story is impeccable from start to finish, more or less, with some dated hiccups, but that's neither here nor there.
Yes, and I feel like Mass Effect is such a phenomenon that I know things about it. I'm aware of things like FemShep and like Garrus is good for some reason.
Yes,
but I don't know. Like I just know its footprint, but I don't know any of it.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I'm convinced. I'm gonna get Mass Effect.
I think I played like 2 or 3 hours of it on the 360, and it's totally in my queue. So I'm going to get to it one of these days. By the way, the thing I always replay because I just remembered now is like every couple of years I'll go through all the like quote unquote great realistic first person shooters like Call of Duty, Battlefield, but the ones that had single player campaigns, right? Because even like you go back to Call of Duty Modern Warfare 1, and the campaign is fantastic. It holds up. And then they did a remaster, so of course when I did the remaster, I had to buy that and play the whole campaign again. And there's this one level where you're in like an American city, and there's like the guy's like screaming at you, and the guy's like this famous actor, and you recognize his voice. It's so great. I forget his name. Keith David.
Oh,
and he's
Keith David's great and everything.
He's in everything, right? He's the
president in Spawn, Goliath. He's in Mass Effect. Like the guy does
pay good money for Keith David to yell at me.
Actually, I saw on Twitter like yesterday a video clip of him
doing a bunch of voices,
all the voices from all the things, right? And
what a treasure he is.
Yeah.
So, and he's like, rally at the Burger Shack, and literally there's like the diner and the hamburger joint. You run up to the roof and you're sniping the Russian soldiers. And so I will replay that, Modern Warfare 3, and Bad Company, Battlefield Bad Company has the most amazing story. And it's like watching your favorite movie every couple of years.
Totally.
I can go back and play those things over and over again.
Yeah,
I remember we have a serious problem in America. I got to tell you right now, there are just too many good games. And it's
that is
crazy.
One of America's serious problems.
Right, it is. Exactly. It's the biggest problem we have. Like forget all this other global warming stuff. We just need to stop making so many games.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's just so we can catch up. We got to catch up for a while. Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time. I want to wrap us up. I want to make sure that we are respectful of the time that you guys need. And I know that you have a hard out. But before we close, I have a favor to ask. We have a saying on this show. Before we wrap up the show, I know that AudioClash doesn't currently have a release date, of course. You are working diligently on it, and it'll come out when it's ready. But what can you tell folks in a brief statement about AudioClash and where they can find information about it?
Yes. So you could go to audioclashgame.com, which also has a link to it on the Steam store. You can also just look it up on the Steam store and wishlist it. We are in a pre-beta testing phase right now. So a lot of the wish listees have also been let into that closed pre-beta. And we're excited to get to our kind of early access launch, which is planned to be this month. Where people will be able to, anyone will be able to kind of play the beta content. And, part of the reason that this is important to us as, speaking for the Living Tombstone, as like we are gamers and game appreciators is, and I love this trend of opening up these early access games is because that feedback becomes so central to like a really great game experience on the 1.0. And it is, I would so much rather feel invested in the development of a game than the 1.0 come out and be like, there's this bug they didn't catch. And it's just it's so cool to feel involved in that level, and that was something that we wanted for this. And so we're really excited to get as many people into the early access as possible, so that you guys can have notes for us and we can have a better game that more people will like.
I love that. And where can folks find y'all on the internet if they wanted to?
You could just Google the Living Tombstone and find us. We don't actually have a website. You can go to our YouTube channel, The Living Tombstone. You can find us on Spotify. We have a Twitch channel where we stream video games every Wednesday. And we are going to start streaming music creation on Friday afternoons, which is exciting. That's, check us out, check out AudioClash, and we love you.
Amazing. Well, again, gentlemen, thank you so much for being generous with your time and being here. The last thing I'll ask you to do is, you have a saying on this podcast, and it's music is life and life is good. It's this idea that if you're making stuff, even when life isn't at its best, you can get through by engaging in the art that you love. So for multiple guests, I always split it up. If Mike, you could say music is life, and then Sam, you could say, and life is good, we will close out the show with that.
Music is life.
And life is good.
That's it for this episode of CPOV Autographs. Our theme music is by Michael Kill. Our logo was designed by Case Aiken and Joey Mons. If you liked the show, please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. It's a great way to help us reach more listeners. Questions, comments, or guest recommendations? Email mr.nat.storm@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at CPOV Autographs. Thank you so much for listening.
Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories,
Immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds,
blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun, whatever fun is to you.
I'm Jeff Moonen.
And I am Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there, so we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Jeff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.